So I am the younger sister of two half-brothers, but I might as well have grown up as an only child. They were 15 and 11 when I was born, and they both moved out of the house pretty shortly after. So I grew up essentially an only child. My parents had a really rocky marriage, always. And a lot of the time it felt like they were too preoccupied dealing with each other than to kind of, for lack of a better word, check up on me, making sure that I was doing okay. And I had a pretty normal childhood, I would say. I had some friends, some moved away. I got a little bit bullied, but I would say that things didn't really get bad per se until I was in middle school. My best friend, who was 10, I was 11, we were in 5th grade, and her mom committed suicide. So she had to move away to Pennsylvania very suddenly once that happened, and I didn't really have much time to react or process. I didn't get to say goodbye. It was pretty traumatic for me as a 10-year-old, even more traumatic for her, because of course her mom had died. So I didn't really have many friends at school, and I coped by reading books, and that's mostly what I did. I read a lot of books. I spent a lot of my time not necessarily in reality. I just like to pretend that I was in Harry Potter, that I was in Animorphs and the Sisters Grimm, and all these other books series, because it made me feel less lonely, and it made me feel like there was an escape available from this crap reality that I was living in. And once I got into high school, things were better. I kind of grew out of my shell. I got more friends, but I'd always struggled with depression and anxiety, but they never reached a boiling point until I entered 10th grade, the end of 10th grade to be exact. So all at once, my parents separated, we moved into a new house, and my dad's brother passed away, all within the time span of about 2 weeks. And so my parents' marriage had been falling apart for quite a while. I always knew that it was going to happen. It was just a matter of when. And in retrospect, looking back, my parents are much happier now that they're separated than they probably ever were when they were married. So in that sense, I'm glad that things worked out in the end. But so we moved into this new house. We had been going into a foreclosure for years. So we just waited for the day when the day would finally come where we would get our eviction notice that we were gonna get kicked out of our house. So we found an apartment just a little bit down the road. And this apartment we moved into very quickly. It was too expensive. It was kind of shabby. There wasn't a lot of space, but it was within my school district, and my parents and myself really wanted to stay within our school district. So I moved into this house, and shortly after, my mom kicked my dad out. Around this time, my mom introduced me to a friend at work. He was 20 and I was 16. I was not interested in him romantically, nothing of that sort, but my mom invited him to live with us around the same time that my mom kicked my dad out. I was peer pressured into dating this guy. I was very uncomfortable by the age gap, but it was a perfect storm of a lot of stuff happening all at once that led to what I can only describe as just an enormous, like, mutual nervous breakdown of that entire house. And I don't think something was right in that house. When we moved in, there were like 12 crosses all up and down the staircase. Like, even if you're religious, I just don't think that's normal. There's bad juju. There was bad juju in that house. So I was essentially peer pressured into dating this guy. He turned out to be very manipulative. He was emotionally abusive. He was sexually abusive. Pretty much just a horrible person in every way. He was also an animal abuser. We had adopted 2 kittens shortly after moving in, and I have vivid memories of him holding up one of the kittens to the ceiling fan and getting pleasure and enjoyment out of watching my cat get repeatedly hit by the ceiling fan. And a lot of events in this house during that time led to me developing post-traumatic stress disorder. My mom was pretty much MIA this whole time. She was neglecting me, not necessarily in a traditional sense, but she wouldn't buy me my school books. She would tell me that we didn't have any money for me to really like eat healthy-ish food, for me to get my school books, afford lunch at school. I wasn't really eating. I dropped to a very unhealthy weight because I was just not eating at all. And during this time, the only things I did eat at home were canned peaches and Pop-Tarts. And to this day, I cannot eat canned peaches or Pop-Tarts. So flash forward 2 months later, I finally work up the gall to break up with this guy, which breaking up isn't even a word I like to use for it because it was more of it was like a non-consensual relationship. But I told him that I didn't want anything to do with him anymore. And I was under the impression that, of course, my mom was going to kick him out. That did not happen. And I was instead forced to live with my abusive ex-boyfriend for another, I want to say, 5, 6, 7 months. And that was when things got really bad because I was constantly fighting with my mom. I didn't get along with her whenever she actually was at home. When she did have money, she would tell me that she didn't have money to buy me my school books, but she would come home with perfectly manicured nails. And so as a 16-year-old, I was like, something's not adding up in my head here. So several months later, I was at camp in July. It was actually the night before the 4th of July when I confided in a camp counselor and told her some of the stuff that had been going on. And it didn't occur to me at the time that what I had been telling her was essentially grounds for legal action. So she was state mandated to report what I had told her. And I spent the next day, the 4th of July, while everyone was dancing and eating barbecue, I was stuck inside talking to policemen for pretty much 5 hours, nonstop. And 4th of July is still a really bad trigger day for me. It's hard for me to be around people at all. But so I entered the foster care system. I spent 3 weeks in a house in Middleburg with some other foster children until I was able to go into a new home with some of my friends at the time and their parents. They became emergency placement foster care parents and they took me in. So I was able to go back to school in Red Hook, which was a blessing. And I was able to kind of resume a somewhat normal life after this. This was around the time that I was that I had to go to court-mandated therapy, and I basically had to deal with processing my post-traumatic stress disorder, which had been building up for over the course of a year. So I ended up living with my friend's parents for a couple of years. I got accepted to college. I attended college. I just graduated. And college was the best years of my life. And I don't say that because I don't have much to compare it to. I'm pretty sure that they probably will always be the best years of my life. I felt accepted for once. I felt like I had people around me that loved me for who I was, that weren't saying awful things behind my back. I grew a lot of confidence, and in general, it was just a great environment for me to be. I aged out of the foster care system when I was 21. For all of the awful things that happened to me from when I was age 16 and up, the one good thing that it did, and I will be grateful for, is it allowed me to attend college for a very affordable price that I probably would not have been able to do otherwise. And so that was kind of, not a blessing in disguise, but, a bit of good that was hidden in there. Also in college, I came back into contact with my mom. I waited 3 years to process everything, give us both time to really think about everything that had happened. And I waited until I knew that the time was right to get back into contact with her. So we did supervised visits at Barnes & Noble, which is like my favorite place. And they all went well. I kept an open mind, but I was optimistically cautious. And it all turned out really good. And I'm happy to say that years later, I still talk to my mom every day, and we've forgiven each other for everything. And it's not easy to say that. It's not easy to do it. I was hurt and she was going through a rough time. So 6 or 7 approximate years after all of the events that happened and landed me into foster care, I can say with pretty good certainty that I'm in a better place mentally than I've been in a very long time. And it seems to be only going upward from here. And I attribute a lot of that to my time in college, just really growing as a person, learning how to be independent, and I've always been an independent person. So learning how to really hone in on that independence and practice it gave me a lot of power that I didn't know that I had before. But that being said, I'm not about to assume that everything is perfect, A+, and then stop going to therapy and stop taking my medication, because I'm a firm believer that there's always more work to be done, that you can only keep going up, but assuming that you're done and you've learned all you can learn is a pretty bad mistake, I think, on a lot of people's parts. Whether it's in school, whether it's in work, whether it's in pretty much about anything. I always believe that there's always more to learn, there's always more information out there that you can always improve. So I still deal with post-traumatic stress disorder every day. I still deal with anxiety and depression, and that's never going to change. But all I can really keep doing is pushing through it and showing myself kindness, and surround yourself with people that you trust, people that you feel comfortable with. Being lonely is probably one of the worst feelings ever. Finding people that don't make you feel so lonely, even when you're out with them, is really important. But whatever the struggle is, even if you think you're not going to live past age 18 or 21 or whatever it may be, even if you can't really imagine the future, for right now you don't have to. Focus on today, get through today, deal with tomorrow when it comes, do whatever you need to do to get through the next moment. And before you know it, it will be in the future. And you won't know how you'll have done it, but you'll have done it, and you'll be so much better for it. Whatever awful crap that you may have had to deal with in your life, it will pass. And even if you can't imagine that, take it all in stride and deal with it when it comes. Just focus on today, then focus on tomorrow, and just keep going. It will pass, even if you don't think it will. And one day, all of the crap that you're dealing with, it will pass, and you won't believe it when it does, but the world will seem much brighter. As cheesy as that is, it will seem much brighter. There will be more things for you to look forward to. Even if it's just your favorite song, find that and hold on to it. It goes a long way. I promise. Yay!